The sounds of my sleepless nights. The tiny wins, the setbacks that shaped everything. The click of a keyboard, the sigh of frustration, the ping of a notification that changed it all. Each one is a data point. A lesson. A story. And all of them are cataloged here, in the profit files I keep. Tonight, I'm opening a series of files related to a single, powerful question: where is the best place to put your money to work? These accounts are not theory. They are not guesses or financial hype. They are real, lived stories from my own journey. Documented. Raw. Practical. What you're about to hear is a walkthrough of the exact steps I took, the mistakes I made, and the lessons I learned when I put my money in 7 very different places. Before we begin, make sure you're subscribed to Profit with A and hit the notification bell. What we uncover in these files could provide the blueprint for your own financial hustle, and you won't want to miss the practical details of what comes next. Let's open the first file. The archive is vast, but every journey has a beginning. The first file we're opening tonight is from the early days. It's not about a massive return. It's about proof. Proof that a single, small step can change your entire trajectory. Let's begin. File Profit 107, the first $100 in a high-yield savings account. It was the tail end of 2020. I was sitting at my kitchen table, which also served as my desk, my dining room, and my war room. My bank statement was open on my laptop screen. I remember the hum of the refrigerator was the only sound. I'd just gotten paid from a freelance gig, a whopping $287. And for the first time, I looked at that number not as money to spend, but as a question. What if I could make this do something instead of just disappearing? The first action was born out of pure frustration. My checking account was offering a laughable 0.01% interest. It was an insult. So I started digging. I read articles, compared names like Ally, Marcus, and Discover. It felt overwhelming. But then I did one simple thing. I opened a tab for a bank called CIT Bank. Their banner said, High Yield Savings. I filled out the online application. It took 12 minutes. I transferred exactly $100. It felt terrifyingly small. Almost pointless. For weeks, nothing happened. The money just sat there in this new, digital vault. I'd log in, see the same $100, and feel a pang of foolishness. Was this it? Was this the grand strategy? I battled the urge to transfer it back. The real struggle wasn't with the bank, it was with my own mindset. I had to reframe what success looked like. It wasn't about getting rich from $100. It was about building the habit of paying myself first, of putting my money in a place that respected it, even just a little bit more. The win wasn't a dramatic event. It was a quiet, monthly email. The subject line, Your CIT bank statement is ready. I opened it. And there it was. The interest earned, 42 cents. 42 cents. I laughed. But then I stared at it. That 42 cents was money that my $100 had earned while I was asleep. It had done a job. It was proof of concept. The door wasn't just open, it had creaked on its hinges for the first time. That $100 didn't become thousands. But it became something more valuable, a foundation. Every freelance payment after that, I'd siphon off 10% directly into that account. The transfers became automatic. the balance grew. The monthly interest payment went from cents to $1 to $5. The lesson was profound. The best place to put your money first isn't the one with the highest return, it's the one that teaches you discipline and gets your foot in the door of making your money work for you. At Profit with A, we classify this as a foundational asset, not for its yield, but for the behavioral shift it creates. It's the training wheels for your financial hustle. But a savings account, even a good one, is just a parking spot. It protects your money from inflation, but it doesn't truly grow it. I knew I had to level up. I had to step into the arena where real growth happened, even if it meant facing the specter of risk. That leads us to the next file. File Profit 214, the index fund that taught me patience. Early 2021. The GameStop saga was all over the news, making stock picking seem like a casino. My kitchen table desk was now littered with notes on P/E ratios and dividend yields, and I was more confused than ever. I had managed to save about $1,500 in my high-yield account. It was safe, but it was itching for a mission. The noise was deafening. Everyone was a day trader. But that felt like gambling, not investing. I stumbled upon a quote from Warren Buffett: "A low-cost index fund is the most sensible equity investment for the vast majority of investors." It was simple. Unsexy. I didn't need to pick winners, I could just buy the entire market. So I did my research and landed on Vanguard. I opened a brokerage account. My hand was literally shaking. This felt real. This felt permanent. I transferred $1,000 from my savings and, after a deep breath, I bought my first share of VOO, an S&P 500 index fund. The next day, I must have checked my portfolio 20 times. It was up $3. I felt like a genius. The day after, it was down $8. I felt like a fool. This emotional roller coaster was exhausting. I'd get a pit in my stomach every time I saw red. I had to learn to stop looking. I had to internalize the real lesson: this wasn't a get-rich-quick scheme, it was a get-rich-slowly one. I was building a piece of ownership in the 500 largest companies in America. That was the story, not the daily fluctuations. The turning point came about 3 months in. I forced myself to only check my account on the first of every month. I logged in, bracing for impact. The market had been volatile. But when the page loaded, I didn't see a daily number. I saw my statement. And despite the ups and downs, the overall trend was a smooth, gentle line, upward. I was up about $60. But more importantly, I felt nothing. No panic, no euphoria. Just calm. The money was doing its job, and I was finally doing mine, being patient. I set up automatic investments. Every single month, without fail, a set amount goes from my checking to my brokerage and buys a fraction of VOO. I don't think about it. I don't stress about it. The account has grown significantly, not because I was clever, but because I was consistent and ignored the noise. The lesson was the power of boring, systematic investing. It's not about timing the market, it's about time in the market. At Profit with A, we classify this as a core engine asset, the steady, reliable workhorse of a long-term wealth-building strategy. It's the antithesis of hype. A high-yield account for my foundation. An index fund for steady growth. But I started to wonder about assets that existed outside of the traditional system. Assets I could touch, build, and control directly. That curiosity led me down a path I never expected, and to one of the most hands-on profitable experiences of my life, which is exactly where we're headed next. The first two files were about putting my money into systems built by others, banks, massive funds. They were passive, and that was their power. But there's a different kind of power that comes from building something yourself. Something you can touch, improve, and scale with your own two hands. The next file is about the first time I turned my money into a physical asset that could generate its own income. File Profit 322, the $500 lawn mower that built a business. Summer of 2021. I was mowing my own pathetic little postage stamp of a lawn with a sputtering, old mower I'd inherited from a previous tenant. It was hot, miserable work. Across the street, my neighbor, Mr. Henderson, was paying a kid $40 to mow his much larger lawn. It took the kid 45 minutes. I did the math in my head, standing there sweating. $40 for 45 minutes of work. That concept wouldn't leave me. I had a little over $500 saved from side gigs, just sitting in my account, begging for a purpose. I didn't draft a business plan. I went to Home Depot. I stood in the aisle looking at lawn mowers. I saw the $200 models, but I knew they wouldn't last. Then I saw it, a commercial-grade, self-propelled Honda mower for $529. It was a massive commitment. That was all my side hustle money. I stood there for 20 minutes, my cart empty. This wasn't transferring digits on a screen, this was cold, hard cash for a physical tool. I took a breath, put it in my cart, and swiped my card. The receipt felt heavy. The first week, I was just a guy with a really nice lawn mower. The shame was real. I had to knock on doors. My first pitch was terrible. I mumbled something about lawn care services to an elderly woman who just smiled and closed the door. I posted on Nextdoor. Nothing. The mower sat in my garage, a $529 monument to my failure. The struggle was the sheer awkwardness of selling myself. Then I changed my tactic. I didn't offer a service. I offered to solve a problem. I took a picture of my own perfectly manicured lawn and posted it with a simple offer. First mow is half off. Let me take this chore off your list. My phone dinged. It was a direct message. A man a few blocks over asked if I could come by that Saturday. I remember the sound of that Honda mower starting up on his property. It wasn't my lawn. This was different. The smell of fresh-cut grass was the smell of victory. I finished the job, he handed me $35 in cash, and said, "See you next week." That was the moment. The moment I became a business owner. The mower was no longer a cost, it was an investment that had just paid its first dividend. That one client led to another referral, and then another. By the end of the summer, I had a weekly route of 5 clients, generating $200 a month in almost passive income. The mower had paid for itself. The lesson was profound. Money invested in a quality tool that solves a common problem can create a direct return. It taught me about local marketing, customer service, and the value of a tangible skill. It was my smallest, yet most empowering, portfolio. At Profit with A, we classify this as a productivity asset, a tool that amplifies your effort and directly converts time into income. It's the ultimate bootstrap investment. The lawn business was powerful, but it was tethered to my physical location and my own time. I wanted an asset that was completely digital, that could work while I slept, no matter where I was in the world. That search led me to a place I'd avoided for years, thinking it was only for programmers and tech geniuses. I was wrong. File Profit 409, Buying My First Digital Real Estate, a Website. Late 2021. I was consuming every finance and hustle podcast I could find. I kept hearing the term, digital real estate, websites that made money through ads and affiliates. It sounded like a myth. I pictured Silicon Valley billionaires. But the concept stuck with me. A website is an asset that lives online, generating traffic, foot traffic, that you can monetize. I had about $2,000 set aside from the lawn business and my other hustles. The thought of spending it on something intangible, like a website, was terrifying. After weeks of research, I found marketplace platforms like Flippa and Empire Flippers. I felt like I was on a shady back alley of the internet. Sites were selling for thousands, tens of thousands. It felt out of reach. Then I applied filters, under $3,000, monetized with display ads, in a niche I understood. I found it. TheCozyKnitter.com, a small blog about knitting patterns with a loyal audience. It was making around $60 a month from ezoic ads. The asking price was $2,100. I spent 48 hours in a state of analysis paralysis, then clicked Make Offer. I offered $1,800. They countered with $1,900. I accepted. The transfer process was clunky and filled with jargon: hosting migration, Google Analytics access, domain transfer. I was in over my head. For the first month, traffic dipped. Income dropped to $45. Panic set in. Had I been scammed? I realized I hadn't just bought an asset, I'd bought a job. I had to learn SEO. I had to learn basic content marketing. I spent nights reading guides on how to write better knitting pattern posts. It was tedious, unglamorous work. The asset wasn't just a magic money printer, it was a fragile engine I had to learn to maintain. After 3 months of consistently publishing one new article per week and optimizing old posts, I saw it. The traffic graph on my screen, which had been flat, began to tick upward. And then the payment from ezoic hit my PayPal, $127. It had doubled. The work was working. The site wasn't just maintaining value, it was growing it. I hadn't just bought income, I'd bought an asset that was appreciating because of my effort. I still own TheCozyKnitter.com. It now makes a consistent $200 to $300 a month. It's not life-changing money, but it's a completely digital, automated income stream. The $1,900 investment will be fully paid back in under a year, and everything after is profit. The lesson was that digital real estate is real. You're buying cash flow and an asset you can improve. It requires work, but it scales in a way that mowing lawns never could. At Profit with A, we classify this as a scalable digital asset, an income-producing entity that exists separate from your time. It's the modern-day version of buying a rental property, without the leaking pipes. So now we had a foundation, a growth engine, a productivity tool, and a digital asset. A diversified start. But I was still thinking small, playing in the minor leagues. The next file is about the first time I invested in something far bigger than myself. Something that truly forced me to think like an owner. That's where things got really interesting. By this point, my money was working in different arenas: the digital world, my local neighborhood, the the broad stock market. But it was all indirect. I was a customer of a bank, a shareholder in a fund, a user of a platform. I started to feel a pull towards something more foundational, something that had real-world utility and value beyond a spreadsheet. I wanted to invest in the bedrock of the economy itself. That curiosity led me to an asset class I'd always considered out of my league. File Profit 518, the REIT that let me own a slice of a skyscraper. Early 2022. Inflation was the word on everyone's lips. The money in my savings account, while earning a little interest, was actively losing purchasing power. I felt it at the grocery store, at the gas pump. I needed an asset that could act as a hedge, something that traditionally held value when the dollar weakened. Real estate was the obvious answer. But I didn't have $50,000 for a down payment on a rental property. I was researching frantically, feeling locked out, when I discovered the key: REITs, real estate investment trusts. The concept blew my mind. A REIT is a company that owns, operates, or finances income-producing real estate. They're required to pay out 90% of their taxable income to shareholders as dividends. I could buy a share of a company that owned skyscrapers, data centers, cell towers, or hospitals. This wasn't passive income, this was ultra-passive income. I didn't need a landlord's license or a mortgage. I just needed my brokerage account. I settled on a specific, well-known REIT, Equinix, EQIX, which owns a global network of data centers, the physical cloud. I bought 2 shares for roughly $1,300. It was the most I'd ever spent on a single investment. The initial excitement was quickly tempered by volatility. REITs are sensitive to interest rates. When rates went up, my shares went down. The red numbers in my portfolio were jarring. I had to deeply understand what I owned. I wasn't just betting on real estate, I was betting on the insatiable demand for data storage. I read quarterly reports, listened to investor calls. The learning curve was steep. This wasn't a set-and-forget index fund, this was analyzing a business. The struggle was emotional, trusting the thesis, the need for data, over the daily stock price fluctuations. The win came quarterly. Literally. My first dividend payment hit my account, $7.26. Then 3 months later, another one. And another. The share price bounced up and down, but those dividends were constant, reliable, and growing. Each payment was a tiny rent check from a server farm in Amsterdam or a data hub in Ashburn, Virginia. I was no longer just a speculator hoping a stock price would go up, I was an owner, collecting my share of the profits. The dividend was the tangible return on my investment thesis. I've held onto those shares and added to other REITs since. The dividend income, while small, is incredibly resilient. The lesson was about cash flow versus speculation. A REIT forces you to think like a landlord. You care less about the day-to-day's estimate of your property and more about the monthly rent check. It taught me the power of income-producing assets and introduced me to a world of investing beyond simple growth stocks. At Profit with A, we classify this as a cash flow asset, an investment chosen for its reliable income generation first and its price appreciation second. It's the closest thing to mailing yourself a rent check. I was now a mini landlord of digital infrastructure. But a part of me was still drawn to the raw, unvarnished potential of building something from zero. Not with a lawn mower this time, but with code, content, and sheer will. I wanted to use my money not to buy an existing asset, but to fuel the creation of a new one. This next file is the most personal one yet, because it's about the investment I made in the engine of all my other investments, myself. File Profit 606, the $3,000 course that 10x'd my freelance rate. Mid-2022. I was juggling everything: the lawn clients, the website, my small investments. But my primary income was still freelance writing. I was good, but I was stuck in the mid-rate zone, competing on Upwork and Fiverr for $50 per blog post gigs. It was a grind. I was trading time for money at a rate that had a very clear ceiling. I knew there was another tier: copywriting for brands, writing direct response emails that drove sales, but it felt like a secret club. I had about $3,000 saved up, earmarked for more VOO. But a voice in my head asked, what if I invested this in the asset that could earn all the other assets? I found a course. Not a cheap $49 Udemy course, but a high-touch, intensive program taught by a known expert in direct response copywriting. The price tag was $2,997. I remember staring at the sales page. It was more than my first lawn mower, my website, and my first REIT investment combined. The risk felt immense. What if it was a scam? What if I didn't have what it takes? This was betting on myself in a way I never had before. After a week of agonizing, I screenshotted my brokerage account balance, then the course checkout page. I took a breath and clicked Pay Now. The course was overwhelming. The first module alone was 50 videos. The homework was intense: breaking down sales letters, writing email sequences. For 2 months, every spare moment was consumed. I'd work my freelance gigs, then stay up until 2 a.m. studying copywriting formulas. The doubt was crippling. Had I just wasted $3,000? I wasn't earning more money, I was spending all my time learning, which felt like earning less. The struggle was the silent, lonely grind of acquiring a high-value skill with no guarantee of a payoff. The win wasn't a single moment. It was a compound effect. I started applying the principles to my own freelance proposals. Instead of, "I'll write your blog post," I wrote, "I'll write a website article that ranks on Google and generates organic leads for your consulting business." I tripled my rate. And I got the client. Then I did it again. My first project at the new rate was $1,500 for an email sequence. That one project paid for half the course. The investment had already begun its return. Within 6 months, my freelance income had more than doubled. I was no longer competing on price, I was competing on value. The $3,000 course didn't give me a certificate, it gave me a fundamentally new skill set and the confidence to charge for it. It was the highest return investment I have ever made because it improved the primary engine of my wealth, my own earning potential. The lesson was undeniable: the best place to put your money is often into sharpening your own axe. At Profit with A, we classify this as a personal capability asset, an investment in the skills, knowledge, and mindset that increase your ability to generate value. It has the highest potential ROI of any asset class. I had built a diverse portfolio, from savings accounts to index funds, from lawn mowers to digital assets, from real estate trusts to my own skills. But there was one final frontier, a place I put money that had nothing to do with ROI, dividends, or appreciation. And yet, in many ways, it became the most important investment of all. That's the final file we need to open. This response is AI generated, for reference only. We've walked through 6 case files. 6 different places I put my money, each with its own logic, its own struggle, its own return. The foundation, the growth engine, the productivity tool, the digital asset, the cash flow generator, and the investment in myself. A complete financial ecosystem, right? But there was a piece missing. A crucial one. Because a portfolio built only on numbers is a hollow thing. The final file isn't about optimizing for wealth. It's about optimizing for life. This is the story of the best investment that never showed up on a balance sheet. File Profit 701, the investment that paid me back in time. Late 2022. By all measurable accounts, I was doing well. The automated investments were ticking over, the side hustles were humming, the digital income was dripping in. But I was exhausted. The constant context switching, from writing client emails to checking stock prices to scheduling lawn cuts, was fracturing my focus. I was productive, but I had no peace. My most valuable resource wasn't money anymore, it was uninterrupted time and mental clarity. I was financially richer but poorer in the moments that actually make a life. The inciting incident was a single, stupid mistake. I was so distracted trying to do my freelance work while simultaneously answering a client text and checking a dividend payment that I accidentally sent a half-finished, unprofessional email to my highest-paying client. The panic and shame were instantaneous. I knew then that my system was broken. So, I made a radical investment. I didn't buy an asset. I bought a service. I hired a virtual assistant from the Philippines for $400 a month. It felt like the most extravagant, illogical, and terrifying purchase of my life. I was paying someone to do tasks I was perfectly capable of doing myself. The first 2 weeks were a nightmare. It was more work, not less. I had to create standard operating procedures, SOPs, for everything. How I liked emails answered, how to schedule social media posts for the knitting site, how to handle customer inquiries for the lawn business. I spent hours recording Loom videos and writing documents. The doubt was deafening. You're burning $100 a week just to create more work for yourself. This is a stupid vanity project. The learning curve was about trust and systematization, 2 skills I utterly lacked. The turning point came at the end of the first month. I was preparing my monthly financial review, a task that usually ate up a whole Sunday afternoon. I went to gather all my statements and invoices and realized it was already done. My VA had compiled everything into a single, clean spreadsheet. I had my entire Sunday back. Then I noticed my inbox. Instead of 47 unread emails, there were 3. She had handled the rest. The feeling wasn't excitement. It was a deep, profound calm. The $400 wasn't an expense, it was a ransom I had paid to get my own mind back. That $400 per month investment had the highest return of anything I've ever done. It gave me back 10 to 15 hours a week. I used that time to land one new freelance client that paid for the VA's annual cost in a single month. I used it to think, to strategize, to finally start outlining what would become this very channel. The lesson was paradigm shifting. The ultimate luxury and the most strategic investment is not more money, but more time. Money is a tool you can use to buy back your most finite resource. It's the final upgrade. At Profit with A, we classify this as a leverage asset, an investment that multiplies your effectiveness and buys back your most valuable resources, time, focus, and mental bandwidth. It is the highest form of financial maturity. And that is the final file. 7 places. 7 very different strategies. But they all share one common thread. Seven files. From a nervous $100 transfer to a high-yield savings account, to a $400 monthly investment that bought back my sanity. Look at the pattern. It starts with defense, protecting your money from erosion and building discipline. That was the savings account. Then it moves to offense, steady, automated growth in the broad market. The index fund. But then it gets interesting. It branches out. It becomes about ownership. Direct, tangible ownership of a tool that generates cash. The lawn mower. Then digital ownership of an asset that works around the clock. The website. It scales to owning a piece of massive, income-producing infrastructure you could never afford on your own. The REIT. It turns inward, to the most important investment you'll ever make, the one in your own capabilities. The course. And finally, it culminates in the ultimate luxury and strategic move, using money to buy back the one thing you can't get more of, your time, your focus, your peace of mind. The virtual assistant. These files show the same undeniable truth. Building financial momentum isn't about one magical stock pick or one secret hustle. It's a layered architecture. It's a system. It starts small, with proof of concept. It builds discipline. It embraces boredom over hype. It values cash flow. It invests in the generator, you. And ultimately, it leverages gains to free up the resource that matters most. The notifications, the ping of a dividend, the rustle of cash, the email from a client, may start slowly. But if you're consistent, if you learn from each file, they start to compound. And eventually, they don't sound like alerts anymore. They sound like a symphony. The music of a machine you built yourself. Don't wait for perfect conditions. Don't wait until you have thousands to start. Start where you are, with what you have. Open your own high-yield savings account with your next $100. Research one index fund ETF. Brainstorm one service you could offer with one tool. The first win, no matter how small, is proof that the door is open. Your only job is to walk through it. If you've started your own hustle, if you've invested in yourself, I want to hear about it. Drop your story in the comments below. Tell me about your first win, your biggest lesson. I read every single one, and your story might be featured in a future profit log. To make sure you don't miss that future file, subscribe to Profit with A and hit the notification bell. We're just getting started, and there are more case studies to open, more blueprints to uncover. This has been a productive one from Profit with A. Until next time, keep hustling.